this to me, and I will drag this thing back to her.
We are talking Monster Mash, and this is directed by Jose Prendes, who's directed a load of Asylum movies before. And yes, this is an Asylum movie. I assumed, first of all, it was going to be Asylum's attempt to emulate the 80s classic Monster Squads, but it isn't really. It's kind of more like Asylum's attempt to emulate the movie Van Helsing that starred Wolverine's Hugh Jackman, although it seems a little late to do that, but there you go. Now, I'm going to tell you, I was not expecting to enjoy this movie, I won't lie, but I kind of did. You might even say this was a graveyard smash. So, let's discuss. Okay, so what's this movie all about? It is a period piece. It takes place at some point in Gothic Europe, I suppose, and we have Frankenstein, played by Michael Madsen. He has got a plan. He's got, you know, his kind of the Frankenstein's monster. In this instance, he's called Boris, but he has an additional plan to create effectively a new being, so to speak, that he can inhabit. Because his body's failing, and he wants to create a kind of creature rather than based on human parts. This time he wants to make a creature based on parts from various kind of supernatural monsters. In this movie they refer to them as outsiders. So he sets Boris, Frankenstein's monster, to effectively collect specific parts of various different kind of well-known monsters. We've got, you know, vampire, we've got mummy, we've got Wolfman, we've got the Invisible Man, and his aim is to create this kind of supernatural, so to speak. So it actually turns up that we have a team up between Dracula, a Wolfman, Ramses, who is the mummy, and the Invisible Man, along with some help from a kind of a witch as well, to team up to create almost like a Avengers-like team to try and stop him, because as part of his plan he has kidnapped Dracula's daughter. Now what will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. Now, does that sound like an absolutely bananas premise? It does, doesn't it? But I kind of liked it. I thought, well, do you know, at least the Asylum is doing something somewhat original. Yes, it's kind of got existing kind of like IP in regards to the monsters, and yes, it's more or less kind of like the Avengers meets Van Helsing, but it's kind of a fun concept. And one of the interesting things here is the likes of Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, they are protagonists, and we spend a lot of time humanizing them and making them quite likable. In actual fact, it's quite amusing. In particular, I found the Mummy, Ramses. He just acts like just some dude, and the funniest things is we have quite a lot of scenes where they're just drinking in the pub, discussing their plans. Now, Asylum is well known for spreading out their kind of runtime with lots of conversations in rooms. You've probably heard me say that a few times. And it is true of this movie, but these conversations are quite fun. And we've got people decked up in kind of like, you know, horror costumes and stuff. Like these monsters just drinking in a pub. It's kind of fun. I thought this was kind of quite fun. And the way these kind of characters are portrayed, they're not classic, you know, they're not kind of like your grandpappy's Dracula. Let me just say that. For example, if we take the character of Dracula, his kind of main motivation here is to save his daughter. So he has a very kind of like human motivation, and although he's kind of played to be quite serious. He's not like a joke or anything. You know, he's very much kind of like being selfless in that fact. He still kills a couple of people to drink their blood, so he's not a complete, you know, heroic character. But it's a little bit like the kind of the Marvel animated cartoon of Dracula, where he was the kind of the protagonist in that. So, you know, it has this interesting idea where we have these kind of characters just kind of talking. And as I say, Ramsey's just funny because he's just kind of like, he just talks like a normal kind of like American guy. It's quite funny. So yeah, and it's such a bizarre scenes watching these kind of characters with pints of beer in the pub discussing about what they're going to do. It's funny. Let's talk about the kind of the visuals. Now, Asylum, let's not kid ourselves. It's a low budget film production company. Initially, I was kind of thinking this movie looks like a porn parody. I'm not going to lie. And there is still an aspect of that. But I just kind of thought, I got used to it. And I kind of got used to the kind of like the sillier aesthetics. And there's some which I think look better than others. I kind of quite like the Wolfman. You know, he looks more like your kind of Universal style Wolfman rather than a werewolf. And I think his makeup was okay. There's some alright kind of like, you know, set design and things like this and kind of extras in the background. I kind of quite liked the Dracula. He does look like he's in a porn parody, I'm not going to lie. But I still kind of quite liked his kind of classic Bela Lugosi style aesthetic that he had to it. And I think the performances, although very silly, were quite endearing. You know, I actually kind of quite like this Dracula, being this kind of very sort of like traditional style, Lugosi kind of style Dracula, but having him be very kind of just very down to earth at the same time, and having these conversations with his fellow monsters and stuff like that. It's just, I found this movie quite fun. And, you know, it has this this plot where effectively Frankenstein is the bad guy, and Boris, Frankenstein's monster, he's fairly powerful and kicks all their asses at one point. So he seems like, you know, he's strong and undefeatable, which was good. And, you know, it ends in such a kind of like I won't give away what happens, but, you know, it ends up in such a kind of like over-the-top way. With a very silly but entertaining kind of climax. You know, you can't help but have a little bit of fun with this one. This is definitely not going to be a film that you want to take seriously. In actual fact, there's about just kind of at the probably just after the third act starts, the movie stops to have a joke, and I won't say what it is. But you're like, really? I mean, this movie is like, it just knows its silly premise, and it just kind of like goes with it. Honestly, I won't say what happens in the finale. I won't say this joke, but it's just like, it knows the ridiculousness of its kind of concept, and it totally leans in with it. It's not like a comedy exactly, but it's just a very goofy movie, and it's having fun with a concept. So if you want to see like a bunch of Universal style monsters acting like a bunch of, you know, bro dudes or whatever they're called, and chilling out and teaming up together to take out a bigger threat, then you know, you may want to check it out. But let's bring ourselves back down to earth and discuss any kind of issues with it. As I've mentioned, this is a cheap movie, and it does look like a porn parody. When I first watched this, I was like, ooh. I mean, it's just kind of like the scene where Frankenstein's monster, Boris, effectively kidnaps the Dracula's daughter. I was just thinking, I could just imagine there's going to be a scene after this that would happen in that sort of film, and that's what it looks like it's going to do. So it really does have this kind of this porn parody look to it, and the costumes aren't, you know, particularly kind of realistic or believable. And I think sometimes this movie has this kind of really fake lighting in it. that gives it like it's just sort of filmed on this crappy little studio, and it's just kind of not really lit very well, if that makes sense. Well, it's well lit, but it looks artificially lit and things like this. So again, that budget is kind of just sort of showing through. And I have mentioned it, I quite enjoyed it, but there is no denying this movie is still quite a talky movie, with little kind of action sequences and actual kind of things that are kind of happening on screen. It's a lot of talking. We do get a few sequences, and there's probably a fairly gory shot involving the Wolfman, but you know, it's few and far between. And this took about the Wolfman and a couple of other characters. Despite this movie being a team up, I felt that some of these characters have very little to do. Our main sort of characters are Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, and they are the kind of the main sort of characters, I suppose. The mummy, the Wolfman, and the Invisible Man, I felt didn't really have a lot to do. They have a kind of a little bit of a they deliberately make one scene each that they have something to do, but for the most part, they just felt they're kind of somewhat padding, you know. And the mummy doesn't really have any sort of special sort of abilities that anyone else has, really. So he's really just kind of there to kind of make the numbers up. So you know, it's very kind of like Dracula focused, very kind of Frankenstein focused, and we spend quite a lot of time with Dracula's daughter as well. There are other kind of like visual effects things that will happen in the movie, kind of CGI elements that will happen, and again, they look very cheap, very cartoonish, and very kind of silly. Again, it's kind of quite sort of fun in a weird way, but you know, it is what it is. And yeah, I think maybe the tone of this movie, it's a little mixed about what it wants to be. It's like, is this kind of like a kiddie film? Is it kind of more of a serious film? Because we do have a couple of gory shots. There are people that get killed, but it's kind of goofy at the same time. Now, I still enjoyed it for what the movie is. I think the movie knows that it's kind of a complete schlock fest, and you know, is leaning into that, as I've said. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10 because I feel this movie is taking that B-movie gauntlet and running it. I don't think it's a good film exactly, but I think for the concept that it's trying to do, for the level of film that it's trying to be, it has some good entertainment value, even though I feel maybe this is not a critically good movie, if that makes sense. But I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Would you see it based on what I've said, or have you seen it, and what were your thoughts? Please do leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.